The Allen Line Company appreciates all of the dedicated carriers it takes to move loads across the U.S. Stay safe.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
A bill in Congress calls for increasing the minimum required insurance for motor carriers to $5 million. However, some members of Congress are speaking out against it, among them Congressman Mike Collins of Georgia. I'll speak with him today. Sometimes tickets are not issued at roadside. Some of them arrive in the mailbox at your home, and those tickets need to be handled in an entirely different way. I'll talk with David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal. And finally, several states are taking action to protect truckers from predatory towing practices and outrageous towing fees. Scott Thompson will get the details on that and more from our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today: the national average for a gallon of diesel pushed even further away from the $4 mark last week. The Energy Information Administration reports that last week's average dipped 4.5 cents from the week before to settle in at $3.94 a gallon. Prices were down in all 10 regions, EIA tracks. The Rocky Mountain region saw the biggest drop of 9.6 cents. The Central Atlantic saw the smallest drop at 1.7 cents. Meanwhile, more of the same this week, according to ProMiles.com, which reports that Tuesday morning's national average came to $3.96 a gallon, down just under 4 cents compared to the same day last week. Prices also down in all 10 regions. We have new details tonight about the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's pilot program for drivers under the age of 21. It comes via the agency's annual safety research forum that took place over 2 days last week. During one of the presentations, the division chief of FMCSA's Applied Research Division, John Mueller, noted the amount of program participants.
Currently, there are 40 approved carriers and 28 apprentice drivers operating, and 21 additional drivers have graduated or completed both of their probationary periods. Recruitment of motor carriers, experienced drivers, and apprentice drivers continues as we try to collect as much data as we can in order to determine if the SDAP program is meeting an equivalent level of safety compared to what is allowed by current regulations. We're expecting to have a final report in the summer of 2026.
That's a slight adjustment up from the last report we got from FMCSA in February, when we reported that just 113 applications had been submitted by motor carriers. The pilot program is intended to accommodate up to 1,000 carriers and 3,000 enrolled apprentices at any given time. The current numbers clearly fall far short of that target. Earlier this year, an appropriations bill removed some of the pilot program's restrictions in hopes of attracting more applicants, including the removal of driver-facing camera requirements. The pilot program is set to end in July of next year. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has released the final version of a new rule that will make automatic emergency braking a standard feature in all new passenger vehicles. NHTSA delivered the light vehicle rule to the White House Office of Management and Budget in mid-January. It proposes that all new light vehicles weighing less than 10,000 pounds be equipped with automatic emergency braking, or AEB systems. The U.S. DOT projects the technology will save 362 lives per year, prevent about 24,000 injuries, and save billions in property damage. NHTSA has also proposed AEB mandates for new vehicles weighing more than 10,000 pounds, which of course includes commercial trucks. The heavy vehicle final rule was previously projected for release this month, but it still has not been sent to OMB for review. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association strongly opposes the move, noting there are currently way too many false activations with AEB systems for a mandate of this magnitude. A bill in the U.S. House that would force federal agencies to take a step back when crafting new regulations and consider how they might affect small business owners has gained more support. Representative Maria Elvira Salazar of Florida is the Prove It Act's fifth co-sponsor. The bipartisan bill is designed with small business owners at front of mind, like owner-operators, which make up some 96% of the trucking industry. The bill's sponsor, Congressman Brad Finstad of Minnesota, told us earlier this year that he introduced it with common sense in mind.
So the Prove It Act is really a way to go after the regulators as they develop rules and regulations to try to implement some of the laws that we pass that's really where the rubber hits the road, and we see a lot of negative impacts on businesses and owner-operators, farmers. And it's in the tune of, all right, what does the rule say? How do we comply with this rule? How do we meet this regulation? And what we have found that it's costing Americans billions of dollars a year.
OOID has thrown its support behind the Prove It Act, saying that the bill would help, quote, keep government overreach and burdensome overregulation off of the backs of the men and women behind the wheel who keep our economy moving, end quote. Meanwhile, another bipartisan bill with implications for the trucking industry has picked up another co-sponsor. The Transportation Security Screening Modernization Act would standardize the Transportation Security Administration security clearance process. Current TSA policies often require separate applications for required credentials, like the Transportation Worker Identification Credential and hazardous materials endorsements, even though TSA conducts a security threat assessment for each program. The bill would standardize and streamline the process. This week, Representative Kathy McMorris Rogers of Washington State signed on as the bill's 36th co-sponsor in the House. A Senate version currently has 3 co-sponsors. When the Senate bill was introduced in March, Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi said it would cut through red tape so workers can get back to moving goods across America, not wasting time and money. A Texas trucker is facing serious prison time after pleading guilty to drug trafficking charges. In 2020, Javier Perez was stopped by police in Massachusetts behind the wheel of his commercial truck. A search turned up 30 vacuum-sealed bricks of cocaine. Prosecutors say Perez was working on behalf of a drug trafficking organization based in Mexico and Texas. He faces a minimum 10-year sentence on the 2 counts he pleaded guilty to and a maximum sentence of life in prison, plus a fine of up to $10 million. A co-defendant in this case, also a truck driver, was sentenced last year to 34 months in prison on similar charges. The state of Delaware is making a concerted effort to get people to drive better around semis. The Delaware Office of Highway Safety has teamed up with law enforcement agencies on the state and local levels for a high-visibility campaign that's focused on the traffic safety of motorists around commercial motor vehicles. One aspect of the campaign is enforcement, stopping vehicles that are driving dangerously. Another is public education through videos posted to social media, along with tips, reminding drivers to leave a following distance of at least 200 feet and explaining blind spots. There are 2 enforcement campaign periods going soon. One is currently underway and runs through May 11th. The next runs for 2 weeks, starting on June 15th. Warmer weather means a reopening of seasonal ports of entry to the north. U.S. Customs and Border Protection announced that the Poker Creek port of entry between Alaska and Canada will be open on May 17th for the summer season and close on September 15th. That's weather permitting, and officials say those dates may change at a moment's notice. Hours of operation will run from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Alaska Daylight Time. The Poker Creek port of entry is one of 4 land crossings into Alaska and is the northernmost border crossing in North America. In a corresponding move, the Canada Border Services Agency announced that the Little Gold Creek port of entry, located on the Canadian side of the Joint Border Inspection Station, will reopen on May 17th, the same date as its U.S. counterpart. And finally, another cautionary tale about blindly following your GPS, courtesy of a man who probably wishes he hadn't. Local media outlets in British Columbia recently reported on a 54-year-old truck driver who was following his GPS guidance over the weekend when it took him down a boat ramp straight into the Osoyoos Marina. Because it happened just after 4 in the morning and was still dark out, the driver said he didn't realize things were going south until it was too late. And while the trucker was not hurt, he did get trapped in the partially submerged cab until a couple of firefighters swam out to rescue him. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Next, I'll discuss efforts to increase truckers' insurance requirements with Congressman Mike Collins of Georgia. We'll hear about how tickets arriving in the mail should be dealt with from David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal. And Scott Thompson covers the latest on efforts to combat predatory towing with state legislative expert Keith Goebel. We'll be right back. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off TruckStop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Landline Now, welcome back. Back in December of last year, Congressman Chuy Garcia of Illinois introduced a bill titled H.R. 6884. The bill is simple. It would increase the minimum required insurance coverage for motor carriers from $750,000 to $5 million, with the possibility of increasing that amount in future years without additional congressional action. It's not the first bill to attempt such an increase, and Congressman Garcia is not the only member of Congress to propose a measure like that. However, other members of Congress and many people in the trucking industry have an entirely different view of the issue. And when it comes to bills like H.R. 6884, it's not a positive view. One of those members of the U.S. House who has spoken out on the measure is Congressman Mike Collins of Georgia, a man who has extensive experience in the trucking industry himself. I spoke with the congressman recently about the bill, the issues behind it, and what he thinks ought to be done. Well, first of all, before we get into the issue at hand, I know that you have a background in the trucking industry, and I'm wondering if you could briefly talk about a little bit about your history in the trucking business.
Well, actually, I am second generation in the trucking industry. My parents, back when I was a child, they hauled logs out of the woods to Georgia Pacific facilities. And so when I got old enough, I started working there, age 12, and started driving trucks. And probably about the age of 15, like most people that grow up in this type of industry, even though we couldn't get out on the road, but you learned how to drive. And then my dad was always involved with politics, so I actually started running our trucking company when I think I was 18, 19 years old. And when I got married at the age of 21, I told my wife there was no way that we were all going to make a living off of it. So we got into the trucking business on our own, and that's where we're at today. Eventually bought my parents out, and the third generation, my wife had given birth to twins the first time around. And they're 31. They've actually been running a lot of the day-to-day operations with my younger brother for the past, 5 or 6 years. So, the next generation has stepped in, and we run just north of 100 trucks all across the country every day.
Okay. Let's get to the issue at hand here. During a hearing earlier this year, you spoke out regarding a bill titled H.R. 6884, the Fair Compensation for Truck Crash Victims Act, introduced by Representative Garcia. And of course, this is the bill that would increase the insurance requirements for trucking operations from $750,000 to $5 million. And I'm wondering if you can start by just broadly spelling out what your concerns are regarding that bill.
Well, the concerns are that when you take a look at the average trucking company out there, 98% of your trucking companies, now, you heard me right, 98% are 10 trucks or less. They're not even valued at $5 million. So, and I know that they're talking about the insurance right now, the minimum is $750,000. And there's no way that 98% of the trucking companies can afford a $5 million policy. And in some cases, there's just not an amount that you can put on there. And the other thing that I always bring up is the fact that, the vehicles that are involved, if you're involved in an accident with a we call them four-wheeler, just a regular automobile, their insurance can start at like $10,000. You cannot replace any bumper on a truck for less than that. So we're at a disadvantage, and then you put on top of that, and AAA will back this up, 75% of the accidents out there are at fault from the four-wheeler, not the tractor-trailer. And so, what the real problem that we have in this country is not the amount of insurance, it's the lack of tort reform that we have. And you have all of these lawsuits that are going on from people that are just what we call bottom fishing, and trial lawyers that are just out there, doing it. They'll file a lawsuit, just to see if they could get some money out of it. And it is just bleeding the industry. And so if you were to implement that law and create a $5 million minimum liability insurance, you are going to destroy the trucking industry.
I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit, and you've kind of referred to this already, but obviously, as you said, this is really going to affect those smaller companies the most. I mean, what do you think would happen to a lot of these smaller motor carriers if something like this were to pass into law?
Yeah, well, when you look at the average return on the trucking industry is around 2.5%, it's going to put them out of business. And in short order, that's what it's going to do. You're going to see your smaller companies fold up. They won't be able to afford this insurance. There's no way.
Now, if you had a situation like that, where you had so many small trucking companies go out of business, as someone who's been in the business, what do you think the overall impact on the industry as a whole would be if you've suddenly lost the smaller business end of the trucking industry?
Yeah, well, what's going to happen is, and it's the same with anything where the government gets involved, somebody's going to pay for whatever happens, and that's going to be passed on to the consumer. You're going to see trucking rates go through the roof, and then you're going to see the consumer prices continue to just skyrocket. Mark, there's no way around that. No one's going to go into business just to lose money and go out of business eventually just by giving your money away. You're in the trucking industry to make money. And the thing is, 99.9% of the people in the trucking business want to be safe. They're not out there to harm people. And they're doing the right thing. And that's where, so you want to look at what the actual problem is. And the actual problem is these trial lawyers that are out there bottom fishing and these runaway verdicts and these nuclear verdicts. And that's where I've always come right back to the point of what we actually need is true tort reform out there. And that just means that when these people don't win their lawsuits, that they actually have to pay. Because an insurance company right now, they will take a look at it and say, well, it's just cheaper for us to pay X amount and be done with it. And so X amount right now on a $750,000 policy is going to be a whole lot different from X amount on a $5 million policy. And then at the end of the day, that insurance company is going to pass that on right back to the trucking company in the form of a rate increase, because every year they're going to take a look at that trucking company's loss runs, no matter what, no matter if it wasn't your fault, even if they just paid off to get rid of somebody, they're going to tack that on your loss runs, and it's going to affect the trucking company's rates going forward.
You mentioned tort reform a couple of times there, Congressman, and obviously that's an issue that a lot of truckers are interested in for this reason and many others. What specific kind of tort reform do you think is needed to address situations like this?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, loser pay. When these frivolous lawsuits are brought, then they need to be held accountable for it, because you can file a lawsuit pretty cheap. That's just filling out forms, and they all got them now. But so it's not much money out to them. But when you sue somebody, they may have to wind up paying, even if it's frivolous. If a jury decides that let's just insurance money and give them the money, and that's where I say it's not right, and that's where tort reform comes in. And the other thing that we need to see is if we can move a lot of these cases into the federal court system, it would be a huge help on the trucking industry just from that standpoint, and get it out of. Right now, when you get sued, you either get sued at where the incident or accident happened, or either the trucking company's place of operation. And believe me, these trial lawyers, they're out there, they're looking at everywhere that they can to try to move these cases into jury-friendly or sue-friendly type of jurisdictions. And if they can do that, then they've got a better chance of getting some sort of verdict in favor of the plaintiff, no matter who was at fault. They don't care about that.
You mentioned there the loser pays concept of tort reform. Something that we've been kind of monitoring in a number of states is state legislatures that are looking at putting a cap on pain and suffering damages. And some states have already done this. To what extent do you think a federal requirement in that area is needed.
Well, and Mark, that literally states that nuclear verdict of what I was getting at. Sometimes I think people already know the terms, but that nuclear verdict is where you have a jury that just comes in. I think in one recent case in the trucking industry, somebody was awarded $250 million. And so that's where these states are coming back and say, hey, we need to cap what's going on with these nuclear verdicts to try to get a handle on it without doing the actual tort reform. But if you did tort, it would not only help just the trucking industry, but you're talking about all industries. You're talking about even in healthcare. You're talking about doctors. You name the industry, and they can tell you that there is a certain amount of runaway verdicts out there that tort reform would be a huge help to them. And when you do that, and you can actually drive the cost back down from everything from healthcare to the services that whatever they provide. So it's not something that's just just for the trucking industry.
I want to ask a devil's advocate question here. We've talked about the current minimum insurance requirement of $750,000. In talking with various insurance carriers, we seem to be finding that most trucking operations, as a practical matter, carry about $1 million. Do you see any need for any change in the current minimum insurance requirements?
No, I don't. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head there, man. The free market works. Marketplace works, and if people see a need to bump up their insurance, and they're large enough, and their company can afford it, then they're going to look at it. But every time that we get the federal government involved to dictate and try to operate somebody's business, I don't care what it is, it's usually a disaster.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about some of the other big issues in trucking right now while we have you on the line here, Congressman. And probably number one on the minds of a lot of truckers is the move by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration to require speed limiters in trucks. What is your view of that issue?
And I think I said this in a hearing not too long ago. We already have speed limiters, Mark. They're called speed limit signs. You see them going up and down every road. And then we have an enforcement called State Patrol and law enforcement, sheriff's office or local police, and they're monitoring that. You don't need speed limiters on trucks. What you need is just what you've got, and that's enforcement of the law. And we have that out there. If I want to limit the speed of my trucks, then I do that. And we do that. Right now, we have the ability to the trucks are set up a whole lot different than what they were 20 and 30 years ago. So we have a lot of control over the torque versus the horsepower. And so you can set a truck up. We can set the limit on it on whatever we want. And we do that more for efficiency and fuel savings, to where the truck can get to where it's going at a safe speed, at a good, at a normal, to save time without being hindered, but yet also give us the efficiency that we need with the fuel economy. So we don't need the government interfering with that side of it. And besides that, we're not the only ones using the roadway. You've got cars out there too. So why are you just limiting to big trucks? I mean, if you're going to do it to everybody. And then where are you going to set it? What's slow enough? 55, 45? Where are you going to stop this? And what's the objective?
Okay. Well, Congressman, that's all I had. Thank you very much for your time. We certainly appreciate it.
Appreciate your time.
That was Congressman Mike Collins of Georgia talking about a bill, H.R. 6884, which would increase the minimum required insurance coverage for motor carriers from $750,000 to $5 million. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. With more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
When it's time to overhaul your truck engine, help protect it by insisting on a genuine Vibertech TVD crankshaft damper. Heavy duty, absolute premium quality, and they're made right here in the USA. Find a dealer at vibertechtvd.com. It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now. Welcome back. When we think about getting a ticket, the typical image we have in mind is being at roadside, with law enforcement officers and DOT officials outside the window writing on a pad. But sometimes that's not what happens. In some cases, a ticket is something that arrives in an envelope in the mailbox at your home, and those tickets need to be handled in an entirely different way. To discuss the topic and get some advice, as well as talk about concerns with the use of personal conveyance, I called David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal. Let's take the case of what happens when you get a ticket in the mail. And I kind of think of a ticket as something I get at the roadside. It's not something I typically think of as coming in the mail. What sort of tickets are enforcement sending by mail?
So there's always outliers, but you can usually group these sorts of citations that you find in your mailbox into a couple of different categories. One of them would be camera tickets. You know, if you've blown by a traffic camera and took a photo of you that was reviewed by someone in a police department, they'll send you a letter saying, hey, this is what we see happen. Another thing could be what we call civil penalty citations. That's not their universal name. It's just what we use. But they are fines that are tacked onto roadside inspections. So say you get a roadside inspection for being overweight. Okay, no big deal. It happens. You adjust your axles and you move on. Well, maybe a few weeks later, your carrier will get a citation in the mail that says, hey, there's this $100 fine related to this overweight inspection from a few weeks ago. So that can happen. And also, just sort of in general, overweight fine penalties can sometimes just come up, as well as penalties for usually some sort of registration violation or whatever. And it's just the states processing something, not necessarily in the moment at the stop, like you said, but it usually routing through a Department of Revenue or some other state system and being sent usually to the carrier or whoever owns that DOT number for some sort of fine.
Okay. Well, let's kind of talk a little bit about what to do, because that's the real question here. What is the very first step you should take if you receive one of these in the mail?
Look at the date. Because you got them in the mail, a lot of these things have deadlines, and they're deadlines for response, they're deadlines for payment. Because things can get lost in the mail, because a lot of drivers are over the road and only check their mail when they swing back through. Their PO box or their home address. Always check the date, because you may have blown past your deadline, or you may only have a couple of days to respond. So it seems simple, but we receive a lot of things from drivers who say, "Oh my gosh, I got this, and I don't know what to do with it." And it was like 2 months ago that the letter was sent, and he only had a month to reply. So there's that. See how much time you have available. Second, see exactly how this is affecting you. So camera tickets often are not reported to your home state, to your driver's license record, I mean. And so usually they wouldn't affect your record, and you could just pay the fine if it's low. Same thing with civil penalties. It's really just a fine. And you can go ahead and pay that usually, unless it's extreme, hundreds or thousands of dollars. Almost always, as the third thing you would check, there's some method of requesting a hearing or a review or whatever. And usually this is not through a regular judicial system. Almost always it's not. But there's some way that you can say, hey, I don't think I should have to pay this. Usually you would mail something back in and someone would review it. So you would want to look for that information if it's something that you would want to challenge. And of course, the fourth thing is, can you actually challenge it? Usually these are based on proof, not on getting an attorney to make a good argument, to get a plea deal, to win in court and get it reduced. Usually it's, did you do it or didn't you? Is this fine accurate to the violation that is describing? If you think you can disprove the violation, then you can probably cancel out the fine. And if you think it's worthwhile, then especially if the fine is high, then you should go and do that.
One of the things I like to talk about are behaviors to avoid, because a lot of folks kind of hard charge into this stuff without really knowing how to proceed. Are there some behaviors that you commonly see people engage in that are best avoided in this situation? And you're smiling, you're grinning.
This might sound a little rude, but don't wait. If you've gotten a ticket and you're a driver out on the road, promise I'm not describing you. I'm definitely describing the guy who's driving behind you. I swear. We see so many drivers who wait until the very last minute or even past it to reply to these tickets or to go get help, to get more information. It's so easy to get something and toss it in the side seat or just, in your lockbox or whatever and just forget about it. It's so easy to do. I do that with my own mail. And so that would be the one piece of advice I have. Do not sit on these. As soon as you get something like this, go ahead and do your research, read it through, try to figure it out, and sort of get some action in place to protect yourself or somehow deal with it before you run out of time. Because these big government entities that are writing these citations, or these municipalities that are just working through these camera tickets or whatever, they do not care. They will not give you an exception because you're a little over the deadline. You've got to do that work yourself to be on time.
Okay. Another example that you gave in some notes that you passed to me earlier was overweight fine penalties. Wouldn't this be easy to combat by just using a commercial scale and bringing the ticket with you, or does that work?
So overweight penalties are, overweight violations are very difficult to dispute, mostly because even if you have another scale reading, and you present that to the DOT in some sort of challenge, the DOT will usually say, well, our scale is correct. We know it's correct. We validated it ourselves. And there's nothing you can say that any other scale would be more correct than ours. I think the only way to make a reasonable dispute, I shouldn't even say reasonable because the DOT can be unreasonable, but a good solid dispute would be to have a reading from before you got stopped by the DOT, and then as soon as you get stopped, go have another reading afterwards as soon as you can, to try to validate, okay, there really was this. Two separate scales on two separate sides of the DOT stop said the same thing, and the DOT was the only one making the difference. I'm not saying that is going to win, but one scale from earlier that day or the day before or when you picked up the load is not enough. One scale reading, is not enough to convince a DOT reviewer that their DOT scales were wrong.
Okay. Let's move on to another topic here, and that is the use of personal conveyance. And this is something that seems to crop up over and over again with people having trouble with, what it is, and how to use it. So I'm wondering, Alex, let's start by defining this. What is the proper definition of personal conveyance in a truck?
So personal conveyance is supposedly to be used for at the end of your 11 or 14 hours, and you can't find a place to park. You can't, you got to park, but if you can't find a place to park, and there is a driver shortage of parking spaces, that you can use personal conveyance for a short period of time to go look for parking. And and there may be other reasons, but that's generally 95% of what we see. So it is out there for you to use, but here's my suggestion: don't use it. Plan better. And I'm not trying to make drivers mad because you can't. Planning doesn't always work necessarily. But if you use PC, you mark it in on the ELD. The officer, if you get stopped, that's probably the first thing he's going to see. And he's going to go, oh, okay, I'm going to dig through this, like crazy. And it's such a vaguely written statute to give officers because they really don't want people doing this. I mean, honestly, they've put this out there for them, but they don't want them to use it because you're still going over your time. And the longer you go over your time, the more possibilities of crashes. I mean, that's the whole point of it. The biggest problem with PC is furthering loads. You're under dispatch and you can't find a parking spot, so you go 10, 20, 30 minutes forward and you finally find a parking spot. But when you get stopped, they don't care because you picked up 20 miles toward your destination. So I tell people, if you're going to use it, turn around and go the other way. Just and even then, don't drive an hour. Even don't, because they're just not going to accept it. There's got to be some place to park, and even if there's not, you can't prove that there was no place to park. That's the other problem. I see this so much now. It's almost better to park in a place and get an inspection for parking than it is for PC, because that's a 7 or 8 point violation. Parking is a 1 point violation. Now, don't park on the side of the highway because they'll give you a ticket for that. But finding some place to park, maybe it's not the best place, but if you move forward, you're just done. If you get stopped anytime you have personal conveyance, and I see a lot of inspection records, and I see a lot of the ELD records, and you see people that use it once, use it 4 or 5 times. I actually saw a person who used personal conveyance for 3.5 hours. Yeah, I'm like, oh, come on.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. The original concept was, if during my day I'm going to go get a meal and it's not where I'm parked, I could go get my meal, return to where I'm parked. I can go to the grocery store just for personal use. But I think it was just a couple of years ago they changed it. And the specific example at the time is if you're at a loading dock and they tell you go away, but you're out of hours, that's when you can use that personal conveyance. But and again, correct me if I'm wrong, it's to get to the very nearest safe parking spot.
Right. And also, if you're in a way station and the officer says you got to pull over here, you say, well, I just ran out of hours. That would be another one. But you would still want to tell the officer that I need to go into PC to move over there. So he just doesn't, he'll either say, no, you can't move then, or, but yeah, you're right. I forgot about that as far as the actual real uses of it. Yeah, you're stopped, you're in a parking spot, but there's no food there. Well, they don't expect you to starve, so you can drive there and back.
Okay. Well, we're out of time, guys, but it's excellent information, and thank you very much for all the information there.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
I've been talking with David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal, a legal services provider for the trucking industry, about what to do if you get a ticket in the mail, and also about the use of personal conveyance. You can learn more by calling CDL Legal at 913-738-4836 or by going to their website, cdllegal.com. Again, that phone number is 913-738-4836, and the website is cdllegal.com. And you can find all that information on our website, landlinenow.com. Just click on the photo or headline at the top of the page. Again, that's at landlinenow.com. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. Please stay with us through a short commercial break. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Capital Reman, your leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, is celebrating its 10th anniversary. Let us help you avoid costly downtime and repairs by visiting capitalreman.com today. Use code OOIDA10 to receive your member benefits.
Get the most power performance out of your rig with Howe's Diesel Defender. It provides maximum lubricity and contains specialized IDX4 detergent to clean and prevent deposits and safely removes harmful water. Visit HowesProducts.com for more information.
Attention professional drivers, do you owe money to the IRS? Integrity Tax Relief Group frees drivers from IRS trouble. Call for help now, 855-976-4291. That's 855-976-4291.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Welcome back. A number of states are taking aim at unfair towing practices. Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine joins us in Studio A for all the details on that, plus a Colorado bill that could change the way idling rules are enforced in the state. Keith, good to see you.
Scott, you're looking well. We're ready for the 1st of May, aren't we? We're about there.
Yes, we are about there.
We are blowing through the early part of the year.
That's how time works.
It is.
It seems to be going faster, but here we are. Speaking of things going faster, we've got a number of bills here that actually got signed into law. Again, regarding predatory towing practices, let's kind of go through the states here. We've talked about Florida a number of times over the past several months. Kind of notorious for predatory towing practices. The governor there, Ron DeSantis, signing this bill into law. Walk us through exactly what this is going to look like as the law takes effect.
Yeah, of course, we've spent a good amount of time this year regularly talking about towing and legislation around the country, and that is because the legislation has continued to advance. And yeah, we're starting to see the completion of these efforts as they've made their way through the state houses. And as you mentioned, Florida. Interesting that the National Insurance Crime Bureau has identified. I don't know how recently it was, but they have identified Florida as being one of the states, or being a state that is notorious for predatory towing. And I'm sure that played a part in the Florida legislature finally getting to the finish line legislation and sending it on to the governor, where it's now law, to address that. So what they've done in an effort to do that is, to this point, the state has lacked maximum rates for towing and storage. So what this new law is doing, it's adding a requirement for counties to establish maximum rates that, of course, towers can charge for cleanup, disposal of hazardous, non-hazardous materials that are incidental to a non-consensual tow. Cities, they're also permitted to enact rates, their maximum rates. The new law also specifies that if you're in an area that does not have established maximum rates, that the Florida Highway Patrol, rates that they set, those would be recognized there. So putting those rules in place as far as like governments and agencies, but they've also gone to also address rates. How are towers' rates? How are they communicated to drivers or owners of vehicles, operators of vehicles? So the new law also specifies that those rates have to be posted if the owner of the vehicle or the operator of the vehicle is on the scene, to provide them with the rates and trying to eliminate some of the shock and awe of what towing rates can be once the vehicle has been towed.
Yeah, several steps in the right direction there in Florida. Very encouraging to see that. We should mention the law there. These rule revisions take effect on July 1st. Also encouraging, we teased it there, but we've got two other states that have put some new rules in place, or will be, I guess, soon. Mississippi and Virginia. I guess we can start with Mississippi there. their new law. What does that one look like?
Yeah, Mississippi is the most recent state to act on this, with the governor signing into law, establishing for commercial vehicles a towing advisory committee. This advisory committee, their responsibility under this new law is to establish regulations for towing recovery service providers, have a statewide maximum towing and storage rate for these non-consensual tows. And then one thing that the panel would not have to do, this is just flat out, this is now law when the rule is taking effect, is that per pound billing for non-consensual tows, that is just flat out outlawed. So doing that, also at least one other provision here worth mentioning is creating a resolution process. If you've got a truck owner who wants to dispute towing fees, recovery fees, and the charges, putting in place a resolution process. This is what this advisory committee is going to be, one of the tasks that they're going to be responsible for.
Yeah, again, encouraging there as well in Mississippi. And then Virginia, we don't have just one, I think, new law or new rules, I guess. We've got two of them, right, going into effect.
Yeah, and both looking to accomplish about the same sort of thing. Again, predatory towing. There, two new laws. The first one, really the focus is prohibiting tow truck drivers, recovery operators, prohibiting them for soliciting or offering a tow or in any manner, whether that's directly a solicitation or indirectly soliciting at the scene of a wreck or where there's the disabled vehicle. So one of the things that had been pointed out during the process was that you've got towing companies that are talking to first responders and saying, hey, if you provide, here's my business card. If you will contact me whenever a situation comes up, whatever it might be that they would promise them. So I mean, essentially kickbacks for these first responders to use these specific tow operators. And another new law prohibiting tow truck drivers, they would not be able to drive by the scene of a wreck or a disabled vehicle and initiate contact with the owner or the operator of that vehicle when there has been a police-initiated tow, or that the owner or operator of the vehicle has requested a tow and they're at the scene waiting for that tow to arrive. You could not have another operation come in and try to take that again, a police-initiated tow. So somewhat of an issue there in Virginia that they're trying to address. A couple of different issues on predatory towing. Both of these new rules, like we talked about earlier, with Florida taking effect on July 1st.
So we've got Florida, Mississippi, Virginia all signing bills into law. Again, taking aim at this issue. Missouri, we've talked about this before. They continue in the State House to push predatory bill protection measures forward. The governors, we've mentioned Governor Mike Parson, not too keen on that idea. So we'll keep an eye out there. They're keeping an eye on that, but we'll update people obviously as that process goes through. I wanted to touch base with you real quick, Keith, on one other issue in Colorado. Looks like they're maybe toying with the idea there in the legislature to give jurisdictions more power to enforce idling rules. This is going to have a lot of implications if it goes forward, but what are they looking at right now?
Yeah, they are very strongly toying with it.
Very strongly.
To the point where they've sent it to the governor.
Well, that is more than toying. They've played with the toy and yeah.
But anyway, I mean, obviously making a little bit of light of it there. But yeah, it would be an issue. And specifically what we're dealing with here is, the state law has uniform idling standards already in place. 5 minutes, no longer than 5 minutes in a 60-minute period. Local governments, they cannot enact resolutions or ordinances that are more strict. They can adopt what the state does, but they can't have more strict rules than that. What the legislation that is on the governor's desk would authorize is it would authorize local governments to have more strict rules in place. I mean, It could be less than 5 minutes. It could be 3 minutes. It could be 2 minutes. You don't know. But worth pointing out, the focus of this legislation is on those vehicles that have at least 14,000 pounds, so heavier vehicles. Something that they've been pushing there this year at the Colorado State House. It's made its way to the governor's desk, and obviously, there are definite concerns with how this might come into play.
Understandably so. Stay up to date on all the latest news on the state level via Keith every day at landline.media and in every issue of the magazine itself. Keith, always a pleasure. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you for having me.
Our thanks to Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine for his time, and our thanks to you for yours. We know you've got a lot of listening options out there, so we appreciate you making time to listen to ours. We hope to see you again soon. In the meantime, take care and drive safe.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm. I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome, and I am a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.